Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Charles Derrick.
This is J Rob.
And this is Bringing the Noise. I'm going to start this off, J-Rob, by saying I have talked to James Edwards before this interview tonight. And I got things that I want to find out about Ted. Okay. I mean, obviously there is a ton of accolades and there's a ton of interesting things that's going to make you guitar players and you listeners out there want to find out and want to listen to this podcast and hear about Ted. But I got to tell you, there's that, some things that I know about Ted. And when I think about Ted, I think about Devil Cat amps. I always see in these pictures of Devil Cat amps. I think about CMG guitars.
Mm-hmm.
I think about guitar tones because I was around a lot of, players that was always saying, man, how, Ted, how does he get those tones? How does he, so everybody, when they go see Ted play, it was, well, let's go look at these pedals. Let's go ask him what he's doing. What are you doing? What are you using? And I remember he would always have two rigs back there. It seemed like two amps, two heads. And it was like, okay, he's got something going on. There's something, different about this guy and using stuff that a lot of people didn't know, about Devil Cat.
The biggest thing Ted's got that those guys didn't have were these. Because the tone is in the hands, and he's got it. You got it, bro.
And and just thinking off the top of my head, I think about the Queen City Gypsies.
Mm-hmm.
I think about it was Scott McQuaig and the Tomcats.
That's yes.
I remember. And I remember I spent with time with Rowdy South.
Yeah.
It was South of 20. I remember rolling with South of 20 for a long time. And I'm going to throw something else out there. And J-Rob doesn't know this. I happened to ask Ted to be in the band with me years ago.
That's right.
I sure did.
Yes.
Yeah. And it didn't work out. It didn't work out. There was, but I'm going to tell you something. The reason I went there and the reason I'm, interested in Ted is not because of all once again, the guy's played all over the country. So we're talking to another, I'm going to call him, and he's not going to agree with me on this, but we're talking to another guitar god, y'all. We're talking to another guitar virtuoso, badass, from this region. And you can learn a lot. He's played all, like I said, played all over the country. Been to LA. This guy's done it. Okay, people. He's done it, and he's got the stories to prove it. Hanging out with freaking Whitesnake, and I mean, look, we can start just digging up all kind of things here. Let's see.
Into that.
Yeah, his friendship with Doug Aldrich as well. His time with NAMM, the shows with for NAMM. There's just some things like I say, and dude, even playing at the Whiskey A Go Go. I'm sorry, the Whiskey A Go Go, and I'm sure there's several LA stories that maybe we can get to, and the time in Nashville, and I also want to dig deep into the time around James, because I know that was a special relationship, and I want to hear about that. And we're talking about a guy that his family had a band and was in bands and all this type stuff. So there's a lot of major history there. And he's got a beautiful wife, Gypsy Rose Hill, belly dancer. Look, the stuff I remember seeing on Facebook, it was like, nobody's doing this. And he would play at a lot of those, and they would do events together, and it was just, man, it really made you glue to this guy. But what I was going to say earlier was the personality this guy has is, cool as ice and just always nice guy. And if you notice one thing about most of the people we've had on this podcast so far, every one of them, the reason they had such a awesome career, or the reason, why they have such a great story to tell, is because of the type of person that they were, and people want to continue to do business with them and want to be a part of that musical journey with them. And I think that's a huge tribute to Ted and the kind of person that he is. It makes you want to, deal with the guy. You know what I mean? There's a lot of great talent out there, and some of them maybe don't last that long because of the type of person that they may be or something. And
exactly,
and these guys right here, straight professional all the way across the board, and good people. So, but having said all of that, we got Ted Hennington on the show tonight. What's up, brother?
Thank you for having me, Charles. I'm so glad to be here, and thank you for saying all that. That humbles me greatly, and I'm just glad to be here with you and J. Rob.
Hey, man, we're tickled to have you, man. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Yeah.
Have you checked out any other episodes before?
I have.
Okay.
Obviously the one with James.
Sure.
But I've been watching some of them all along.
That's awesome, man. Thank
really
you.
enjoyed it. Really have.
Yeah, I probably tell was just kind of a BS session, man. It's.
Yeah, but I knew with Charles doing it that it was going to be right, and that I just from what I know of him and then talking to him, I knew he wouldn't do something halfway.
No, you got that. That's a fact.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot. I really do.
All these guests is cool every show we do, man. But when we get the badass guitar players on, my fur is standing up. So
I appreciate
I'm excited about it.
Dude.
He just got some pedals in. A UPS truck came. Brought him some stuff.
I just got some pedals. I ain't even got to play with them yet. So.
Hey, that's always a fun day, isn't it?
It's that's what I was telling him. I hadn't had time to plug them up.
Truck pulls up. Yeah. But that's always it's just like Christmas all over again.
Looking at, I've got the box, all the little case candy stuff in the box with them and stuff. They're just beautiful.
Right. Oh yeah, I know how you feel.
Now, see, I'm big about gear now, but yeah, I can see where that would go. You know, the guitarist and all of the gear and all the fresh stuff. You know.
Yeah,
the guitarist can have a problem with it. It's
oh yeah,
they call it
really can.
gas gear
And
acquisition syndrome. So
yeah, and especially now, because there's always something new out there, and the quality of things is, as far as tones, is so much better than it used to be.
yeah,
In some ways, and it's just everywhere you look, there's something that you can use somewhere.
sure. Oh, and my problem is like a lot of other people's. You're probably the same way with the tone and the style of music you play, but it's trying new gear to achieve an old sound, you know, because it's just so hard to beat.
Mm-hmm. You know, I'm have been fairly set on my tone for a good long while, which we can get into that, because even though my rig has changed somewhat when I went with Devil Cat, the basics of it are the same. And eventually you find those things that work. And the really great guitar players that I admire, most of them, a few things may change in their rig from time to time, but that basic stuff doesn't move very much.
Right.
And like you said, a lot of it's in your hands too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you got somebody that's a really great guitar player. You can give them the cheapest piece of gear and guitar it is, and it's still going to sound like them, you know.
That's it. That's it for sure.
There's something I didn't put in there, and we were talking about it earlier, but this guy's in Stone Senate, y'all. I didn't throw that out there. This guy is in Stone Senate as well.
Yeah, just
and
fun
going all over the country, man.
Yeah, starting to again.
So we'll
thankful for that.
Hopefully get to several adventures here. Oh, and speaking of which, talking about the gear, it was told to me that y'all, you and James had a motel room seeming like a guitar store, and he said you laid out all your gear in a motel room, and it looked like a very fully stocked guitar store.
It did, and it was on the 5th floor too, so everything went up an elevator, because we just didn't trust people not to break into something. And there may be a few pictures of that somewhere. James probably got some of them, but yeah, that was when I started doing showcases with James, when he was pitching as a solo artist, that every time we went, and eventually we finally broke down and got a storage locker at SIR, but until we did, everything went in the room.
Wow.
Everything.
How many guitars was in this room? Just guitars?
There would have been probably at least 7.
Yeah.
As I remember it, because there were several things that were different tunings, and then also stuff that had acoustic. So, and when you're doing that stuff in Nashville, this changeover is really quick. So it was just easier to have the guitars already tuned where we needed them. But the big thing about the hotel room adventure with that was the 2 guitar rigs that went in the rooms. Because
okay.
You touched on this earlier about seeing the 2 amps, and the reason for that is me and James both run stereo rigs, and what that does is it widens your sound, and the second amp is the stereo image. There's several ways you can do it, but that's the reason for that. And James made this statement to me one time that, well, if I listen to my music in high fidelity, I want my guitar to sound like that too. And the stereo rigs came out of that. And, you touched on Doug Aldrich. Doug has been a huge influence on me in a lot of ways, just like James has. And the thing that maybe talking about me and guitar tone is I've studied that to the nth degree. And I looked at players that had really great tones and how they went about doing that. And if I saw an interview with them, just really paid attention to maybe the little things they said that people might not pick up on. And my strength as a guitar player is work ethic. I know a lot of players that are blessed with more ability, but and I know you can relate to this, Charles. I don't know many people that will work as hard to, even on something as simple as a guitar tone, and much less when you start talking about the business end of music. And so I put a lot of research into it. Some of that probably comes from my background is in science or whatever. And, sounds, I don't know. This just always been something that I didn't mind digging into.
Yeah.
On that stereo rig, just since that's being mentioned, are you running fairly identical settings on both amps? You running like one dirty, one clean?
Well, originally, the what me and James did when we set those rigs up, we built our rigs to complement each other.
Yeah.
Like initially, he ran one amp. And being a guitar player, you'll know what this means. One of his heads had EL34 power tubes in it.
Right.
One of them had 6L6s. And initially, the amps that I used were all EL84 based because we wanted to cover the entire tonal spectrum of what those tubes would do.
Sure.
And now the question you asked, the second amp is a mirror image. It's just slaving that signal from the first amp out. So basically you just get a mirror image on the other side. Now, to go further into that, when you do that, effects like dual delays or stereo choruses get really big and spacious. And now with James's rig, there is a little bit of tonal difference because of the different power tubes.
Sure.
Now the rig I run now with Devil Cat it's a little more different than what I initially did with two heads, because when I switched to Devil Cat, you buy a new guitar rig, especially if you're going to go stereo, you can get into a good bit of money.
Serious money.
So I'm gonna tell you one of my little secrets here, which probably not a secret, but I haven't seen anybody else really do this the way I'm doing it yet. First off, Devil Cat, great company out of Statesboro, Georgia. They also, it's Christmas CMG guitar. Well, that amp is it's a 6L6 based amp, but he and his amp designer Lane White figured out a way to really juice a 6L6 tube with a little bit higher plate voltage and not fry the tube. So when I got that rig, I'm like, once you play stereo, anything else is just kind of a letdown.
Oh man, yeah, it's like it's no comparison after you've done that.
I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? Well, again, remembering Doug Aldrich is what led me to my rig. When I first started talking to Doug, back in 2008 or so, Doug ran, it wasn't a stereo rig, it's what's called a wet, dry, wet rig, meaning the two cabinets on the outside got his signal with effects. The cabinet in the center was just the amp with no effects. Well, I noticed that Doug ran his two affected cabinets off of a MOSFET power amp. It wasn't a tube amp, solid state, just to put that signal out there. So I said, okay, well, if that's good enough for Doug.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that Seymour Duncan had just brought out this little pedal size power amp called a Power Stage 170.
Know exactly what you're talking about.
It will match the impedance on the cabinet. It varies the wattage from, on a 4-ohm cabinet, you're pushing maybe 40 watts. On an 8-ohm, you're pushing somewhere around 70. And on a 16, you get the whole about 150 watts on it.
Mm-hmm.
The cool thing of the Power Stage is it had an independent volume and a 3-band active EQ. That's the amp that creates the stereo image of my rig. And it has just been flawless. It's so good that when we went in the studio to record with Toby Wright, he recorded the rig just as it is, even with a solid state power amp pushing one side of the signal.
Wow.
So that's what I do now. And I know that got into a little bit there, but I could go a whole lot further.
Oh, dude, no, I'm we're all in my bag right now. So, but that's like you said about that solid state power amp pushing that. Like you said earlier about stuff getting so much better. It's kind of like with some of the digital effects. You know that I'm playing a head rush right now with what we're doing with the Dukes, just because we're doing in ears. You know, we don't have any stage volume except the drums. Right. It's working out really well, only because in the last few years, you know, before then, anything I heard digital was just garbage compared to a tube amp. I mean, there was no way to get the response that you're getting, you know, from your hands there. But some of the stuff they're doing now, man, if you dial it in, it's pretty hard to tell, you know,
it's
coming through a PA.
Much better. And, you know, we used a few amp sims on the new record, and like on the Queen City Gypsies record that's out, I use some really different things on that. But there's for a guitar player right now, there are so many tools out there that you can use that sound great.
Right.
And now me, especially live, it'll always be an amp in a cabinet. Partially because I can't really do in-ears. I've had an issue with my left eardrum that's been repaired twice, and anything close to it just really messes with, for whatever reason. But I guess the good thing of that is especially if bass frequencies are not EQ'd right, I know immediately.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm growing more and more used to the in-ears. I don't mind them, but me and him were talking about this earlier, because I figured out some ways to try to remedy this. Maybe you just don't get the same tone from those little armatures as you do with a speaker pushing air. You know, it's just not the same tone.
When I initially recorded with James in Nashville, we recorded with a producer named Mark Lambert and an engineer named Mark Capps, who was at the old Sound Shop studios up there that were right off the Mumbrium, that's no longer there. But Mark Lambert made the statement that to get really great guitar tones, you got to push air.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, that the two things that are really hard for modelers or whatever you want to call them to emulate are moving that air and sag.
Yeah.
Where a tube amp has, or some of them, not every tube amp is like this, but like a good old push Marshall just has that little bit of sag to it. And that's where I can tell the difference. Now, that's not to say that what those modelers do, to me, people that look at them and go, well, this is going to replace my tube amp, they're kind of looking at it the wrong way. It's like, it's a great tone on its own. And if it works for you, then use it for what it is.
Yeah.
And I use some of all of it.
Yeah, I'm not, too hard-headed to try to do new things. Like, say, what I'm using this head rush for and what we're using it in the way that we're using it's working perfectly.
And it's a great unit. I know a few people using them.
But I mean, I wouldn't say that if I were to go play, some kind of solo blues gig or something like that, I'm probably going to have an amp there and not do the in-ears. But it's two different ball games.
Right. And you're using the right tool for the job you've got.
For the job, right.
And exactly. That's the name of the game right there.
Well, jump in, Derek. We'll quit being geeky for a minute.
Hey, I'm letting y'all go to town, dude. I'm letting y'all go to town because that's good stuff. And we need that too, because I know there's a lot of guitar players listening, and they're gonna know. I mean, I'm sitting here like, I know some of this, what you're talking about, but some of it's out of my league. You know what I mean?
It's just a passion thing that some of us share.
But I know, y'all feel free to go to town on it, dude. I'm loving it. I mean, if y'all like it, I love it. But I do want to hear, some things about. I want to start off with your dad and that influence there, and let's hear that story of the family and how the passion got created.
Okay. I don't ever remember there not being music in the house. And my dad grew up in South Louisiana. He played guitar, but he was an exceptional rock and roll piano player, and his voice had no limits. He could sing anything he wanted to. So from an early age, that was in the house. And Daddy, I can remember he'd sit down at the piano. One of the songs he played were two songs. He played Green, Green Grass at Home a lot, and he played Sunday Morning Coming Down. And I thought those were my dad's songs. I never realized it was Chris Christopherson, and I guess most people might know Porter Wagner on Green, Green Grass at Home, but I just knew it was Daddy. And every Christmas he sang "Oh Holy Night" at the church, and of course he's my dad, but nobody could touch him on that. So he worked on the pipeline in Alaska, and on one of the trips home, he brought home a 1972 Ovation guitar. And I'd sit and watch Daddy play and watch his fingers move, and I thought that was neat. And he would play this little blues riff, and he could play Johnny Be Good well enough that, I'm like, that's cool. And of course, anytime we were in the truck, anytime we were wherever, he had music playing, which at that point of my dad's life was usually Merle Haggard. He loved Conway Twitty because Conway came from a rock and roll background. But my dad, going backwards just a little bit, I asked him, how'd you learn to play piano? And he said, your pawpaw showed me middle C on the piano and said, okay, either you're going to get it or you won't. But where he really learned was sneaking into clubs in South Louisiana and watching Jerry Lee Lewis and Little Richard and people like that before it was called rock and roll. He met Elvis 3 times before anybody knew who Elvis was.
Nice.
And so he had all that background there. Later on, I found out that at one point he got offered the piano position in Buck Owens' band. He turned it down because he could make more money on the pipeline. And Daddy always wrote songs too. So I think I was 9, and we had a trumpet in the house because my older brother had played some. So I picked that up before I picked guitar up. And when I started playing guitar, Daddy wrote me on notebook paper diagrams of 7 chords and 1 bar chord. And that's where it started. And And it started on that Ovation guitar, which to this day is still one of my favorite guitars to play. And it never, I don't ever even remember my fingers getting sore. It just, from the first time I hit that E chord, I just knew. And but my dad he was so broad in the music that he liked that I didn't realize back then how well that was going to serve me in keeping gigs. But that's where it goes back to, actually, him and my sister. I would say, as far as giving me the foundation in music to be able to appreciate and do everything, it came from those two people. Because my sister is 5 years older than me, and her record collection was everything from Rufus with Chaka Khan to Earth, Wind and Fire to Emmylou Harris to Aerosmith to Zeppelin, and one very important record. I guess I was right around the time I started playing trumpet. I was sneaking around in her room one day, which if she would have killed me if she'd known. And I found this one record she had, guy by the name of Ted Nugent. And it was the Weekend Warriors album, where he's jumping over the amp and his guitar's got the shotgun pump on it. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. And he's got long hair and his first name's Ted. And maybe a month later, I saw him on the Midnight Special. And I didn't pick up guitar for a couple of years, but that stayed. And not to mention, I just loved the way he played and still do. And but because they were so broad in the music that they liked, and two, my dad, he was never one of those that said, "Oh, I don't want you listening to that." You know, he encouraged me to listen to everything from classical to rock to whatever it might be. And so somewhere maybe 6 months after I started playing guitar, Daddy had been writing songs for quite a while. My older brother played drums, and my mom had picked up bass. And we moved to Nashville just because he's like, okay, I'm going to go chase this dream. And so that's where it initially came
family.
from. Full family. My pawpaw on my dad's side played and wrote songs as well. And my pawpaw back in the 40s actually had a radio show for a while. So there was never a point that that wasn't there. And from the minute I hit that first E chord, I just knew everything else that I had thought I wanted to be when I grew up went out the window.
That's great, man. That's a great story.
Well, so Louisiana, and then what brought him north? What brought your dad north?
His parents, my granny, his mom was from Quitman, Mississippi, and she and my pawpaw had moved back there, and my dad finished high school at Sulphur, Louisiana, but he went to college initially at Jones Junior College, and then at what became USM. At that time, I think it was still Southern Mississippi University. And so that's what brought him to Mississippi. And then he met my mom while he was in college. And so that's how we ended up being where we were. And I was born, for the first 3 years, we lived at Raymond, and then we moved to Jasper County, a little community. Some people call it Turnerville. Some people call it Antioch. It had one store. It was 9 miles from the closest town, and just farmland.
God's country.
But yeah. And in a way, because either we were outside doing something or I was playing guitar. So you couldn't really ask for much better than that when you're, 11, 12-year-old kid.
So what happened when y'all went to Nashville as a family?
Well, Daddy, for the first little bit, Nashville was probably like it is to a lot of people. You don't really know what to expect until you've been there for a while. And so initially it was a lot of knocking on doors and sending stuff. But finally, Daddy met a person named Johnny Slate. Johnny Slate was a songwriter for Warner Brothers, and he wrote Houston for the Gatlin Brothers. He wrote Don't Look Back for Gary Morris, Friends for Razzie Bailey, and then he had also wrote Better Love Next Time for Dr. Hook. And he liked some of my dad's songs. And one day, Daddy took my sister with him to sing one of those songs. And as soon as she opened her mouth, he was like, we're taking her in the studio. And the demo she did, there was one of Daddy's songs on there. And then there was a writer for Warner Brothers. Of course, Johnny had some of his stuff on there, but there was another writer there that named Matricia Berg, who now people would probably know from songs like Strawberry Wine and You and Tequila. And
wow.
she's just a fabulous writer. And there were some of her songs on the demo as well. And the cool thing of that was when they recorded that, they let me be in the studio. And of course, Warner Brothers was using alias guys up there. So, and this is just, to me, this is so cool. There were two guys that I remembered from that session. Obviously, one of them was a guitar player named Michael Spriggs. And, because he didn't know me the time of the day. I was a 13, 14-year-old kid that didn't know anything, but he took time and showed me what his setup was, which interestingly enough, during that time frame was probably the precursor of things like a Headrush, because he ran a rack, it went straight into the mixing console. But the most important thing that he taught me was something I heard James say later on, was knowing when not to play.
Yeah.
Rather than just playing all over everything, session guys, you knew where to pick their spots. Michael Rhodes, he is an awesome player. Well, that was roughly 35 years ago. And when we went in to record the new record with Stone Senate, walked outside one day because Joe Bonamassa had been there and Michael Rhodes was there. And I said, Michael, there's no way you're going to remember me. I said, but you played on my sister's demo 35 years ago. And I said, I've always wanted to tell you, thank you for being nice to a little kid that didn't know nothing. And he was just blown away. I couldn't have asked for it to have been better.
Wow.
And so anyway, my sister recorded that demo, and then her producer had some really bad substance abuse issues that kept him from really pitching her and following through on the deal. And I think at that point, my dad seriously started to think about, okay, this is my kids here. And of course, for me, I was going to be there one way or the other, but it took a roundabout road, which seems to be the story of my life. But good thing of it, like I said, everywhere you went, there were great players. and it was real easy to be really inspired. And also at Chapel Hill, I met a guy there that played guitar, and same age as I was, been playing about the same amount of time. But the difference was where I had come up at that point, really playing country. Session guys like Reggie Young, those were big guys to me. Well, this guy I met, first time I sat in his car, he played me Over the Mountain by Ozzy, and it changed my life as far as some of the ways I played. And then it seems to be another thing that reoccurs. About a month later, I saw Ozzy on the MTV broadcast of the US Festival. He had this guitar player named Jake E. Lee. Mm-hmm. And for my teenage years, Jake wasn't my real daddy, but on guitar, he was my daddy.
Yeah.
There's still things in my right hand that I know where they came from.
Nice.
And I know that covers a lot of ground in there.
Well, that was I was actually going to bring up Jake E. Lee,
and everybody that talks to me about guitar probably should.
I was actually watching a little bit of him, I don't know, a month or so ago, man. He's still slaying pretty good nowadays.
Got to see him, I guess it's been about 3 years ago. The thing about Jake, and not just Jake, but this is one thing that I always picked up about guitar players, but I knew from the minute I heard Jake play that he had a lot more than hard rock in there. And then in just devouring information on him, sure enough, he came from a jazz piano background. He had played country. If you looked at some of his licks, you could tell that he had watched bluegrass banjo players. And but I always liked players that were well-rounded, that had a lot more to them than just a one-dimensional thing. And Jake was also the first guitar player that I didn't realize it at the time. I actually didn't realize it till way later on. He was the first guitar player that made me aware that it's more than just guitar that gets you those good gigs. Jake, people know him from Ozzy. He was Ronnie James Dio's original pick to be his guitar player before he got the gig with Ozzy. He was David Coverdale's, one of his first choices to be in the Whitesnake supergroup. And you don't get those kind of gigs. You really don't get them off just a guitar playing. And I didn't realize that back then, but I'll cover that in here too. But he just a great player. He had it all for me, and I learned a lot from him. Still do.
No, well, back to what we was talking about, and I'm sure this is a part of that, but just being, the kind of person that people want to deal with and want to be around, and I mean, yeah, we look at it in band members. It's like, do I want to deal with this person? Do I want to be on the road with this person and do shows? Because and being in a band, this as well as we do. It's like a marriage, man, in a way, And
it's you're roughly 22 hours of the day that you're not playing music with that person, and band chemistry is maybe one of the most overlooked things that there is. And I find that more so at a regional and local level, where you get guys that are like, whoa, man, we're just going to do a band. But if you're really going to be serious about it, then you got to look a little further. And those guys and girls, you've got to be able to get along. And that's a really fortunate thing of Stone Senate, maybe more so than a lot of bands I've been a part of, is for the most part, we get along really well.
Well, I think a lot of that attribute goes back to what you were saying earlier about that common goal. If everybody's on the common goal, it's not drugs, it's not alcohol that's a first priority. It's not, this bad, relationship with this, whether it be a guy in the band with a girl or a girl in the band with a guy.
It can't
you're
always
all
just
focused.
be about money either. It's the goal of the overall thing.
Yeah, sure.
You've got to be able to put that ego aside. And I've been in a couple of really good bands that ego was what tore them apart. And if you've got one person in that band that thinks, well, this is really all about me, and I can do this with any 3 or 4 other guys, I can almost guarantee you they're never going to make it.
It's not going to last.
And that just doesn't work. And eventually good musicians and people that would be good in a band are not going to deal with that for too long, especially when you're at the point of trying to make it and there's not a lot of money in it. And then it's real easy for you to look at it and go, why am I dealing with this person?
Yeah.
And so you gotta be able to put that ego aside, and you in a position of a guitar player, or if you're trying to get a gig, you got to be somebody that's dependable, that's pro, and that people can get along with.
I've said that a lot of times, man, about touching on what you said earlier, the being off stage part, being able to get along and kind of fellowship and a brotherhood, sisterhood, whatever, folks you got in the band, that stuff, being able to gel there, to me, is just as important as your rehearsal time, really, as far as the product that you're going to put out on the stage.
It really is.
Because then you're going to war for these people that you really care about and want to see succeed as much as you want to succeed.
That's right. That's exactly it. And rehearsal time goes much better if you actually can get along with the people you're rehearsing with.
Absolutely. Sure.
Yeah.
So,
and to throw in there also, can it be exposed this way? People who are not toward that common goal are not putting forth the effort that maybe, 1 or 2 are, you know what I mean? And they're either holding back or they just don't want to put that into a band,
it can definitely be some of that. And it can, one thing that I've seen is, well, I'm not going to put the effort into the band if it's not more about me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that just doesn't work. It just doesn't. Now, okay, if you're say if Ted said, okay, this is going to be the Ted Hennington project, and I'm going to sing, I'm going to do all this, whatever. That may be a little bit different in that you're directing the focus to that one person, but that one person still has to be able to get along with a band to come out there and have their back. And if you don't, you're not going to have a quality musician there or a band that gels, and you wind up having to take what you can get, and that shows. And that's no disrespect to any players that get with a band just because I'm going to pick up a gig. I don't mean that at all. But if you've got one person in there that's really trying to make it all about them with no regard, then that's just never going to go well.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. 110% for sure. I want to ask you about a guy named Anthony Johns. And when did he come into the picture?
Well, Anthony and James came into my picture at the same time. And this is the story, most people would know some of that. when I met Anthony, me and James would go over to his house. Anthony worked at Peavey, so he'd have all the newest little toys, and it was 24/7 guitar. But this is the part of it that most people wouldn't know. When I was in college, I had a lab partner that the first day I walked in, they looked at me and they said, "You're not from Meridian," because I know all the long-haired people in Meridian. And it just so happened that they knew the first time I heard of Anthony and of James was from this person. And there again, maybe a month after that, I ran into both of them at Mississippi Music in Meridian. And I can still tell you to this day, James was playing a black Vandenberg signature model Peavey through an Ampeg tube amp. And, you know, he just sat there and played. I know James, when he was looking at me, he's probably sizing me up, you know, and which I might have been doing the same thing. But so once we realized, okay, these are the people I've heard about, then I started hanging out there and just playing a lot of guitar. And to be really honest, a lot of both mine and James's rigs and tones and things that we look at, Anthony is in a huge way responsible for some of that, because for years he did all our setups on guitars. He worked at Peavey. He really understood how everything worked in an amp, and he was just a guitar nut like us. And so I told him, a couple of weeks ago, I said, you're as much responsible for how I go about things and the way I handle companies as anybody, because he worked for Peavey. So I kind of got the lowdown on how a company like that worked. And when you start going after endorsement or dealing with those companies, it's good to know that. Sure. And so, yeah, he those days were just constant guitar. It was so fun.
Now was he in a band too? That name sounds familiar.
He played a little bit locally, but he just never went out and went on the road and went after it that way. He's a great guitar player.
Or maybe really I just saw him at Peavey or something, because that name sounds familiar, because we had the Peavey endorsement, for years.
Right. Could be.
Maybe so. I don't know, but that name definitely rings a bell with me. Mm-hmm. Now, what did this start up the jam sessions at James's folks' living room and all of that? Is this?
Well, in a way, yes, but that didn't come until much later on.
Gotcha.
But it did. If anything, at that point in time, James was so far ahead of everybody, still is. But if James noticed anything back then, he maybe noticed I was dedicated, but really and truthfully, at that point, obviously the guitar part you see right away. But James is one of those people that I just knew from the get-go we were going to be best friends. And as far as playing together, that really didn't happen until many, many years later. And but the groundwork was right there.
Yeah. And so, and maybe we're skipping a lot of years here. You let me know, because I'm not sure of what years that we're talking about here. I'm assuming this is maybe what 80 late 80s.
Anthony was 91.
90, okay.
Around in there. And I didn't start the stuff you're talking about at James's parents was around 2005.
Okay. All right.
And there's a really cool story about that. That was when all the rigs were going to the hotel rooms. But when James started doing showcases up there in Nashville, just prior to that, I had not seen James I really hadn't seen anybody for 8.5 years. And my brother gave me a 4-song EP that James had done for Christmas that year. So one night I said, well, okay, I'm gonna go see him play. And I did. But anyway, the first showcase he did, I went as his guitar tech. Just, make sure things were running okay, that he had guitars he needed, all that kind of stuff. Well, James, in his material, he had a lot of stuff that was tuned dadgad. And he had the guy that he had hired to play that gig to do those acoustic parts was just really having trouble with it. There's no reflection on him. He's a good player. He just wasn't used to that. So after the first rehearsal, we were sitting in the hotel room, and I was sitting there playing all the songs that James was doing, just on an electric guitar, just playing along, and he's sitting there, and he looked at me and he said, maybe I ought to get you in my band. And I looked at him, I said, maybe you should. Because nobody knows his rhythm hand the way I do. Uh-huh. And I understood where he was coming from on those songs. So when we got back from that showcase, that's when the jam session, me becoming a 100 times better guitar player, started in his parents' living room. And what it was is he had me learning all those acoustic parts. And if anybody that's ever met me or James, and I tell people this story, when God said Ted was going to be a guitar player, he looked at me, and he pointed, and he said, that's going to be a guitar player. Well, when he made James, he reached down and touched them hands, and he said, this one's going to be a real guitar player. And but some of the chords he makes are just, they would be tough for anybody. And literally for hours, I'd play a part and he'd go, nope, 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 nope. And then finally he'd say, that's it. And we did that for a long time. But I wouldn't take anything for it, because those practice sessions of doing that with just 2 acoustic guitars and sitting 3 feet away, I wouldn't be close to the guitar player I am had it not been for that. That was pivotal in me really stepping up. And I wouldn't take anything for it. Really wouldn't. But that's how that came about at Big Jim and Miss Evelyn's place.
Well, the fact that you wasn't hard-headed, and the fact that we all learn a whole lot more when we keep our ego in the bag. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And we say, okay, what can I learn? What can I learn from this guy? Not sitting there trying to show them, hey, let me show you what I can do.
Right.
Well, and here's the thing: if you took that attitude with James, you'd find out real quick.
Wouldn't gonna be there long.
He's like, okay, this guy's gonna show you just how much you don't know. And I mean that in the best way. I mean, anything that I think I can play, he can probably play 10 times better. He's that good. And James,
keep in mind though, he rant and raved on you too during his
big time.
Well, and I appreciate that, because I know there are any number of guitar players that James could have said, hey, this guy's good, and I don't mean this just with Stone Senate, and I'll get into this in just a minute, but the fact that James looks at me that way means a lot to me. And outside of guitar playing, if I didn't play at all, me and James are tighter than brothers in a lot of respects. But from the guitar playing thing, back when I met James, pre-internet, if you got to see a really great guitar player, especially around Mississippi, you were usually at least 10 feet back from the stage and you got one shot at it. When the concert was over, there goes Eddie Van Halen. Hope you picked it up. Well, with James, I could sit 3 feet away for hours on end, and he's such a great player, but he was never the guy he was always very open to not just showing you a lick, because that's never been my thing. He would watch my playing and say, well, maybe if you did it this way. And he was, from day one, he's always tried to get me to see why a guitar player approaches things the way they do. Why did he play this note in this position? Why did he do this? And that's invaluable. And we still do that. After all these years, we still do that.
Well, that's why both you guys are professional guitar players too. And you don't stop.
If I have an advantage with James over maybe some other people, is that I know his rhythm hand, and I know, I've listened to him and watched him enough that we always sync up well. And some of that's him knowing me as a player too, and knowing where I can go, where I can't go. And, so I'm sure it's obvious. I can never say enough good things about what he has taught me as a musician, not just a guitar player, but as a songwriter, mixing records, you name it. It's just, I can't say enough good. And then on top of that, like I said, he's the best friend I've ever had. Yeah. And we've been there for each other away from music and whatever it is. And I appreciate him having faith in me to this is what I was going to go back to. The South of 20 gig. When James joined Stone Senate, he told the guys in South of 20, because they were going to audition guitar players, and he said, no. He said, once y'all hear Ted, y'all are not going to want anybody else. And they said, he's easy to work with, and they said, y'all are going to love his wife to death. And also with Scott McQuaig, it was the same thing. James had been doing some gigs with Scott. Of course, Scott's had major label record deals, and when Scott said, well, can he handle it? James said, yeah, he can. And so him having that kind of faith in me, to knowing that, he can put his word out there, and I'm going to at least do my best to make sure everything's cool, that means the world to me.
That's awesome, man.
Heck yeah. No doubt. Yeah, I remember him speaking really highly of you, and
pretty much the same thing he was saying back, how he felt about you, man.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I sure appreciate it. I really do. And I try to let him know that. I think far too many people in this world, when they've got a friend like that or whatever, too many people don't let them know. And nobody's guaranteed that they'll ever get to tell them that.
That's right.
You're right. You just said a mouthful right there. I say it all the time. Me and J. Rob talk about it all the time, that, because I've seen people on their deathbed, mm-hmm. and there's a whole lot of, I wish I would have did that, or I wish I would have said this, or whatever, whatever it may mm-hmm. be. And because, time is the most important thing we got. You know,
that's it.
And we ain't promised a second of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So you said you met Gypsy Rose at the same time, around the same time as James.
Right around the same time. I met Gypsy when I was in college. Now, we didn't end up together till 20 years down the road, but I just knew when I met her, which, you know, come to find out that I just knew she didn't look like she really was from around here. So there's something about her. And, that memory stayed with me for all those years. And when we started talking again, I had no idea she was a belly dancer, not a clue. But she asked me if I could write some music for her. And it just opened the world up in a lot of ways, because when I write for her, I'm writing with movement in mind, rather than maybe I'm going to put this chord here, this guitar lick here because it's a cool lick, whatever. I think more about, okay, what's she going to be doing here? And she was, because of her dance background and the fact that she is immensely broad in her musical taste and in things that she had seen around the world, because she's traveled a good bit, and it makes me approach not just music different, but life too. And, you know, down the line, when she asked me to pick up some different instruments that I had never touched, it makes you look at everything different in your approach to guitar. And like some of the Middle Eastern stuff, like an oud, that is a very different instrument.
I was thinking about that. I watched the video on YouTube where you were playing the oud and explaining all that stuff. So my wife has one. She spent some time in Saudi years ago and had one made, you know, and right. I've, you know, fiddled with it a minute. I hadn't even looked up to see how to tune the damn thing, but it's pretty interesting instrument though.
You know, one thing I do with all of those, strings have just always kind of made sense to me. But with an oud, I tune it for what I want.
Oh, really? Okay.
How it works for me. I mean, I can tune it the way they do that, but I don't always do that. And I don't always do that with a guitar or with anything else. It's just one of those things that I sort of make it work for me. An oud, it's similar in an odd way to a dulcimer. Okay. And the reason I say that is because you've got a lot of drone notes there, where you're hitting that open string to go with a chord or a melody line that you're doing. The obvious difference is that it has no frets. So all those half tones, quarter tones that you hear in Middle Eastern music, those slides are real easy to do that.
Right.
The pick is completely different.
Yeah.
But I play an oud both with my fingers, with an oud pick, and with a guitar pick, depending on what I want. But I would never have picked that up had it not been for Gypsy, ever. She asked me, "Hey, you think you could play one?" And I'm like, "Well, let's get one and see." And it, you know, it went from there to last year. I got it's sort of a Viking instrument called a bass uhiko.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's very different. It's horsehair strings, no neck, no fretboard. You change the pitch of the note, kind of like if you had an old wash tub bass with weed eater line. Tighten up on that broomstick, raise pitch of the note.
Wow.
Well, a uhiko is 3 or 4 strings like that, and you play it with a horsehair bow. And that one, I hadn't quite got that one under my fingers so much yet. But the cool thing of that is aside from the fact of writing for her, which is just truly inspired music for me, some of those instruments found their way on the Stone Senate record too.
Yeah, I saw that.
And through the years, James has played some of the QCG shows. One of her goals in that was bringing dancers and musicians together, and we know that's a fickle group. It can be a really fickle group, but she's done that to me probably more than she realizes, and it's from all around the world. Like the QCG record that I've got out now, I've put 3 singles out. I've kind of gone a little bit different route with it, but it's getting played around the world. And that's a testament to her vision. And I just happen to be the musician that goes with it, but it's really hers. And she deserves all the credit in the world for that. And, she makes me a better person. And I know, I hear people say, Ted's, he's easygoing, and I try, I really do, but I know living with a musician ain't never easy. And but she inspires me in so many ways. She just does. And what can you say? That's your life partner there,
That's awesome. Yeah. I know exactly what you're saying. That is awesome. I think me and J. Rob both have, felt the testament of that for sure.
Absolutely.
I've especially give J. Rob a story here about some of this. When I met Gypsy, her mother was a professor at the college, and she asked me if I had ever heard of a guitar player named Juan Serrano, which I had not. But the Juan Serrano she was talking about is the guitar player that made flamenco guitar a solo thing rather than accompanying a dancer. He was the first person in Spain to ever present it that way. He played for President and Mrs. Kennedy. His first U.S. performance was the Ed Sullivan Show. And me and Gypsy got married. I got to meet him. And
wow.
It's hard he was one of those people that when he was walking up to the hotel, I saw him before he ever came in. And it's one of them people that you just knew there's something great about this person.
Had an aura or something.
When we met him, Juan I think he was 80 or 82. He did not look that old. Well, he had this guitar with me that had a story to it, but he took it out of the case and he looked at me and he said, well, I don't play much anymore. And he starts tuning up and I'm like, yeah, right. And like 10 minutes, it's the most amazing guitar you've ever heard. I mean, this is a guy that the flamenco player that most people would know is Paco de Lucia. He took lessons from Juan.
I heard of him.
So,
oh wow, okay.
We had dinner with Juan and his wife, and we've been talking. I could have talked to him for days. Just his life was that interesting. But he leaned over to me and kind of smiled, and he said, well, what I really meant was I don't play concerts anymore, but I play every day. Yeah, I can kind of tell. So, but those are the kinds of things that Gypsy has brought into my life. And you can't, I never thought when I first started playing guitar that I was going to sit down with a flamenco player that had played for presidents. And when I first started playing trumpet, a lot of marching band music was Spanish music. and you just never fathom, you never know where it's all going to end up and how it's going to go.
Well,
And
that's the joy to, seeing
mm-hmm.
where the road leads you.
And, Gypsy, around Meridian, around this part of the world, they wouldn't know belly dance were it not for her. And not only that, some people may know this, but there is a Romani Gypsy Queen buried in Meridian, Mississippi. At the time, to this day, it's still the largest funeral Meridian's ever had. 20,000 people.
Oh, wow.
Came to her funeral. Both she and the king and their family are buried at the Rose Hill Cemetery in Meridian. Well, Gypsy's in large part responsible for that story being brought back. And that's some of her inspiration for what she's done. It's just, Gypsies were free. That's a good word for it. And, that's, as a musician, I remember telling Scott McQuaig one time that I was working towards, as a guitar player, a more free-flowing style that's maybe a little by the seat of your pants, so to speak, but not where you listen to it and go, he was thinking about this, and this, and that's why he structured something that way. And I get that from her.
Nice. Love it.
Dude,
love it. Love it. Love it. So that was okay. What year did you guys, what year did y'all get married?
We got married in 2015.
2015. Well, but y'all, how long had y'all been together before that?
A little while. We had not really dated for that long, but I've known her for right at 30 years. Yeah. And there was just a long period of time that we were not together, or wherever we were, and without going too much into that. But so it was just a roundabout journey to get there. You know?
I understand. I totally understand. That's awesome, man. I love it. That's good stuff right there. Gypsy Rose Hill. And I never got to meet her. I never.
Yeah.
That I know of. I don't think so.
No, I don't ever remember all of us being together at the same time. Yep. But yeah. That's there.
But I knew y'all were, solid as a rock, and everybody knows y'all to be the power couple. Now, so you're still living somewhere around Meridian?
Yeah, I live just in Choctaw County, Alabama.
Gotcha. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Man, Meridian just ain't what it used to be.
Not even close. It's me and Gypsy talk about that a lot, because when she first put her dance troupe together there in Meridian, it was a completely different place. Mm-hmm. Both from the aspect of things to do and the population base, and the drop in the population there in a relatively short amount of time, it's just staggering to me. And and obviously with that, then you lose places that you could go do things. Yeah. And in doing what she does, it's magnified even more. And but yeah, it's nothing like it used to be over there.
Even when I was playing football at East Mississippi, Scuba, Meridian was the place to go. It was a totally different thing then, even in the late 90s than now. I mean, it's amazing how much it's changed even since then.
It's like I said, it's just staggering how much it has fell off, and it's sad in a lot of ways, and Yeah, I don't know. You see places like Meridian. It's not the only place that has gone that route.
No.
I don't.
Columbus is another one.
Yeah. And you wonder if those places are going to make a real effort to come back, and what for a town, for a whole city town to come back, it takes a collective effort. And it can't be, it's kind of like, in a way, being in a band. Your band is stronger when every member is working towards that goal. And they know, this is my part of this. And I don't care that somebody else is doing this, that maybe they get a little attention. Our common goal is in front of all of us.
Or the whole. And,
when you start talking about city politics, oh my goodness, getting people to agree. And, that's tough. That is really tough. And Meridian has seen a lot of change in its voting base, in its money base, and opportunities for employment, everything. And they've got a real job in front of them if they're going to come back from that.
Absolutely. And that's the same story with all those towns, man. I mean, I can sit here and name a bunch of them that have just Columbus, Meridian, Grenada, Jackson, and even starting to really happen in a lot of the towns around Jackson. It's just, they're kind of just getting worse and worse. And it's like, what is going on? And people are, decent families are just trying to keep moving out, keep moving away, and just those places are just getting worse and worse, running from it's not fixing it.
Yeah, that's a lot of what's happened in Meridian is, for lack of any other way to say it, decent families don't want to be in the middle of crime.
Yeah.
And be that Meridian, Jackson, wherever it is. And that's a lot of the issue there. Yeah. Just to be really honest.
And you've always, you grew up there, you and James both, right?
Well, James saw a lot more of it than I did. We lived about 35 or 40 miles from Meridian. And when I was a kid, we might go to Meridian 2 or 3 times a year, maybe. We tended to go to Laurel more than Meridian because we lived in Jasper County. And then, when I was 12, we moved to Tennessee. So I didn't see so much of it then.
Really? And, okay. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. And I met James and Gypsy pretty close to the same time when I was in college. So it was a little bit later on.
Where about in Tennessee did you move to?
30 miles south of Nashville, a little town called Chapel Hill.
I know exactly where you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. It's where Grady Martin was from. Fabulous guitar player. And it of course, some people like this, and some people probably tell me I'm whatever for saying this, but it was also the birthplace of Nathan Bedford Forrest. The school I went to was actually named for him.
Okay.
So, but just a small town, really small school, and but in a good location to be out from Nashville, but not be too far away from it.
Right.
Yeah.
So how long were you there? How long did you live in Tennessee?
Nearly 5 years. Went to high school up there, and we moved up there. My whole family played music, and we moved up there for that reason. And within maybe a couple of years of that, my sister was cutting demos for Warner Brothers. And back then in the late 80s, Nashville, had a lot of excess, so to speak. And it just so happened her producer was one of those people that was into all that. And I always kind of thought when when her deal with Warner Brothers fell through because of some of his stuff, I always kind of thought my dad said, do I really want my little girl in that? And it just sort of seemed like he backed off of some of it, which I can understand.
Sure.
And
what's it worth? You got to figure on what's it worth to attain it. If
right, and it there's a lot I can say about that whole experience, and my sister would probably have a different perspective of it, but from my perspective, she would have been Shania before there was a Shania. That's just the reality of it. And I wouldn't take anything for the experience, because it was the first thing of me really seeing how that town worked. And, when you're a teenage guitar player also, Nashville's just loaded up with great players. And everywhere you went, there were great players, where in Mississippi, you might run across one James and 100 guitar players. And in Nashville, everybody you saw was good.
Yeah.
Because that's what they did. That's what they moved up there for. And so I learned a lot.
Like, what was your band life like from around, I think earlier talked about meeting James in the early 90s. Was you what kind of bands were you in there through the 90s and 2000s?
Well, I took a break. I just got burnt out on a lot. I just finished school. So for about 8.5 years, I didn't play in bands. I still played some guitar. And at the point that I got back in touch with James and started playing again, I knew my dad had always wanted to do a gospel record. And so we actually did a couple of, I'd maybe call them more Christian country records with some rockabilly in there too. We did 2 of those. And before my dad got to where he just couldn't. And then went and played in Nashville with James, and that led to Rowdy South, which was probably where a lot of people around Mississippi became aware of me.
Now, was this the first version of Rowdy South?
Second.
Oh, this is the second version. Okay. But I'll say this, the band that became the original Rowdy South, I was at their first gig at Bennett Auditorium in Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
Okay.
I can still play all of the songs they played that night, even though I wasn't in the band. But no, this would have been the second version.
Were you in that band the whole time?
The second version,
yeah. Second version? Well, hell, I met you then and didn't even realize it, because I was at one of you guys' shows, I think when Shay was singing for you.
Yeah.
At the dry dock, and we sat on the picnic tables after the show with James. Well, we was talking about it on the podcast too, with James doing the John Anderson voice.
Yeah.
And we were just cracking up. So I met you that night. I know me and Jay did, and I just one of those nights, I guess.
I remember playing Dry Dock too. It had those little cabins right down from it.
Yeah.
So, from Rowdy South, I played in a local band called Plow Mule for a little while. That just, looking back, it was a stepping stone to a band that I was with in Georgia for a couple of years. And when I came out of Plow Mule, James, when I got the offer from the band in Georgia, I talked to James about it, and he said, you probably need to carry a band on your own guitar-wise for a while. So I did. I met those guys at Bama Bike Fest at Forkland, and I just remember from the first time I heard their drummer hit a drum, I was like, that's somebody I'd really like to play with. His name is Grant Long. And I was playing that with a different band, and we had really bad weather over there, so they moved us inside. And their guitar player I don't know if he had a panic attack or what, but even inside the building, it had leaked, but they still had us play after it all got done. Well, that band from Georgia played first, and I was helping clean the stage up, and their guitar player was nowhere to be seen. So I set his rig up. When he finally got in there, he was just beside himself. And I told him, I said, look, I'm going to stand right here in front of the stage. You turn your amp up and you just play rock and roll. So I did that. But in the course of doing that, I sat there watching Grant, and I grew up with a brother that played drums. And I kept noticing that every time Grant came off a fill, he was just perfect where he was. Not to mention, he had a very unique quality for a drummer in that I can pick his playing out anywhere. And he just had something different about him. And a month after that gig, I saw their singer put up that they needed a guitar player to fill in some shows. So, I sent him a message. I said, look, I've got 2 weeks off a month, let me know. And because it was so far away, I think he kind of thought, well, whatever, and so not too long after that, he posted again, hey, I really need a guitar player. And I sent him a message. I said, look, I probably know your whole set anyway. I said, this is what I need. And so I went over there and played the first gigs, never had a rehearsal, drove over, set up. And from the moment we hit the first chord, I kind of saw all of them with big grins on their faces. And so for the next 2 years, that's where I was. And to be honest, it didn't end real well because, there again, there was an ego that got in the way. And but Grant, the drummer, and Neil Yurta, the bass player, I'm still really good friends with. I still work with them on some stuff. Neil has been involved in every QCG record. And so coming out of that band, when I came back is when I got the gig with South of 20, and also with Scott McQuaig, because Scott, he had done the whole road thing when he had record deals. So with him, we played every so often, and it just worked out I could work it with the South of 20 schedule. And both of those bands, there were just so many great times, and friends with all of those guys. And of course, obviously trademark South of 20, we ran a lot of the same roads. And but now Scott, that will always be one of my favorite gigs, because Scott, for everything that he had done, James put it really well. It was like he gave you a blank canvas and said, do your thing. And you've got Scott McQuaig, who was on Capitol MCA. His bass player, Tommy Etheridge, Tommy's brother was Chris Etheridge, who James talked about. And then Walt, the drummer, was the drummer for the original Rowdy South. So it's a really good band, a really fun band, and good people. And with Scott, he's a great slide guitar player. Obviously, just to me, he's maybe the best singer Meridian's ever produced, and that's saying a lot. And really good songwriter. And so at the point of coming out of Scott's band, there was another band in there. Again, ran into a little bit of ego there, but strangely enough, ended up with a drummer and a bass player that played on the last QCG record. and have just become great friends of mine. And they were people that Gypsy had known for years. And then I got the offer from Stone Senate. And so that sort of gets you there without me touching on things I really don't want to go into, and touching on the things I do.
What year was when did the Stone Senate? I mean, when did that happen? And how did that go about? I mean, I'm sure James opened that door.
He did. I had played a couple of gigs with Stone Senate, actually filling in for James when he had back issues.
I remember that.
And that was in West Virginia. And then I would sit in with him from time to time. And the Marcus Brown, the guitar player I replaced, he's one of the nicest people you would ever meet. And when he decided to that he just was ready to not be on the road so much, and he had really good reasons for it. Marcus told him, I can't imagine anybody else. And of course, James right away, he was like, y'all just tell me to make the call. And but I knew from sitting in with them, being around them, that it was a good fit. I knew how me and James played together, and I knew that would be really cool. And like the day James wrote a lot of the music to Lazy River, I was sitting on the couch with him when he wrote it. I already knew how to play the song just from watching him. And I just knew it was a good fit. And thankfully it has been.
Nice.
That's awesome. Are you talking about Marcus? He actually joined y'all on a show here recently, didn't he?
He did. And sit in up at the East Tennessee Music and Motorcycle Revival, I think is it. We all call it Loretta Lynn's.
Right. Yeah.
They have our property, but yeah, he came up and jammed with us and hung out the whole night, and that was great. It was great for him to be there, and we were opening for Billy Gibbons that night, so it was a really cool gig on top of it.
Yeah,
and
man.
I can't say enough good things about Marcus. He's just a really nice guy, and for me these days, nice people like that really mean a lot to me.
Sure. I mean, that's pretty unique and cool that something like that can go down, and everybody's still cool with it and cool to be around everybody, and not, oh, well, that's that guy that replaced me, and not be that kind of way.
Yeah. Marcus and Clint started that band.
Yeah, that's what I thought, that he was one of the founders.
And as far as I'm concerned, he's welcome to come up anytime he wants to. And I'm never going to be like that about somebody. And especially when there was no bad blood for anybody there. Marcus was just tired of being on the road.
Right.
And he had a teenage daughter, and he wanted to be there for her. At least that's, what I know of it. And I'm not going to say I know everything Marcus was thinking about it, but the bottom line for me is he's just a great guy. And so I was glad he did that.
Yeah, that was killer. Him putting the word in for you.
Yeah.
I
want to hear about more about the time in Nashville with James.
Okay. James was working with a producer named Freddie May, and they were pitching James as a solo artist. And so after that initial gig that I went as a guitar tech, when I started playing guitar for him, there was a space in there of probably a good solid year and a half where they were really pushing for him to get a deal. And so we were doing showcases up there, and we recorded 5 songs. And that band that we had together at that time was just killer. It was just good bunch of people, and great players, and And that was a fun time. You know, I had no doubts. Of course, Nashville, as fickle as it is, proved me wrong, but that material is just super strong. And I think the fact that James, some of those songs that we were doing, he's had somebody that's cut those and done really well with some of them.
Yeah.
And but that experience is the reason, as a guitar duo, that me and James are so tight and locked in. It was all those hours of doing that. That was the first place that we started working on harmony leads and things like that. And both of us, in addition to building the rigs to complement each other tone wise, we looked at chords in the rhythms the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like Angus and Malcolm do with AC/DC. And a lot of people don't realize kind of how Paul and Ace did in Kiss, where you're playing a different inversion that makes your guitar chord really big.
Right.
And that was the place where all of that started. And you know, after that, every band that I've been in with James, even if I just got up and jammed with him, we're always locked in. And but that time in Nashville is what developed that. And you know, not to mention we spent a lot of time riding up and down the road and talking, and you know, that's probably, truthfully, even though we'd known each other for a long time, those trips are where we really got to know each other, and on a personal level, not just a musician level. And we talked about a lot of stuff back then, and we still do. That's carried over to how it is now.
Yeah, I had a guy like that playing. We was best friends from like little, you know, way down in elementary school all the way, you know, still great friends. But we learned to play guitar pretty much together and spent all those hours for years and years. And, you know, we could probably get a play now and be in different rooms. I know exactly what he's going to do. He knows exactly what I'm going to do. And it's always been about trying to complement to make a bigger, broader sound go on.
And, you know, of course, now, you know, with Clint playing guitar also, when we put together guitar parts, we take all that into account. And and it never discount the experiences you share with a friend finding their way into a guitar part, because it happens. And that's really to me, that's part of the real magic of it, is when you do have something like that.
It is, man. It's you can't just go do that with anybody, you know.
Right. And, you know, you get a lot of guitar players, and to be honest, and this is just my take on it, if you're going to really be a lead guitar player, especially, you know, leaning in any sort of aggressive type of music, you got to have some confidence in that. But not to the point that you're not going to work together with another guitar player. That can't work. But like with me and James, all those parts work really well together. But there's stuff in there where me and James are like, okay, when we play this, there's going to be guitar players in the crowd go, did you see that?
Yeah.
And you have some of that. And some people, to me, it's sort of the old gunslinger attitude. You know, you got to know you can draw that out there when you need to.
Hey, man, well, that's basically what you got.
Right.
Yeah, well, I mean, that guitar and strap is like having the two holsters there. That's exactly what you're doing. You know, you're having fun and not to have a horrible ego with it, but you are trying to kind of show out a little bit. You know what I mean?
there's some stuff. There's one song on the new record called All the Broken Pieces. And when Toby heard that song, he said, okay, he said, I want y'all to go like Greengrass and High Tides Outlaws, guitar back and forth on the end of this. Well, of course, that wasn't enough for me and James. So we sat down and came up with a harmony part in that song. And you cannot hold back on it. You've got to hit it every night and go, okay, I'm going to nail this sucker every night. It's not a timid type of thing. And, you got to have a little bit of confidence to know you're going to do that. And, not to mention you're playing harmony parts. So they got to be together.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I like that, I like I've always liked hearing guitar players, even if it was a bluesy thing. It's something me and James have talked about. If they got what I call grease in that right hand, in that pick hand, it's kind of like, okay, you grow up in the South and your mama put on a pot of peas and all she put in it was water. And you're like, okay, well, then she throws some bacon grease in it and you're like, oh.
Yes, sir.
Same thing. That's what me and James, if you ever hear us say, well, that guy's got some grease, that's what it is.
I got you.
Nice.
Oh, man.
All right. Well, tell us about what is this about NAMM shows in LA? And for people who don't know what that is, that's the National Association of Music Merchants. It's the largest trade-only event for music products, pro audio, and event tech industry.
Right. The first year we went to NAMM, actually me and Gypsy go to NAMM, and we've got a friend. She met this belly dancer from out in California, and her name's Marguerite Kusahara. She is like a legend in the belly dance world. She came and did a show in Meridian with Gypsy, and on the way back to the airport, we asked her, hey, you think you could get us NAMM passes for Anaheim? And she said, yeah. She said, I think I can do that. So we went to that first one, thankfully, through a contact that Gypsy had. And I guess the first company that paid attention to me, so to speak, is a company out of Denmark called Carl Martin Effects. And, I told Gypsy kind of some people I wanted to meet. Well, of course, the minute I run into Doug Aldrich, he's like, well, you're hanging out with me, and so she came back over there and she said, Ted, she said, I found the owner of Carl Martin. So I went and met him. His name is Soren Thornburg. I think that's right. Yeah. But anyway, so that was the first endorsement I picked up and it sort of laid the blueprint for us at NAMM, because when she's with me, I'm going to get immediate attention, period. It doesn't matter if it's rock stars or companies or whatever. And so we went to that one, which was just a lot of fun. And then when we went to Summer NAMM the first time, I specifically wanted to go talk to Chris Mitchell from Devil Cat. I had been following his company for a long time. And
how long have they been around? I'm sorry to cut you off.
Let's see, about right at 10 years now, I think.
Okay. The first I'd seen of that company was from seeing stage shots of your rig.
I had actually watched videos of them at NAMM. That's how I found out about them. And to be really honest, when Peavy moved everything to the Middle East, I had played their amps for years. Don't have anything bad to say about it. It just so happened that when they did that, I was kind of looking for something different. And I had looked at 3 different amp companies that I had kind of said, okay, I'm seriously going to look at these. So we went and met Chris Mitchell at Summer NAMM, him and his wife, Ashley, his main amp designer, Lane White, and just right away, we all hit it off. And so we had went back to Los Angeles. This was before I was in Stone Senate. Me and Gypsy flew out to see them at the Whiskey the first time they played there. And we flew out of Atlanta. I left my pedal board in the trunk with a guitar, my main stage guitar. And when we came back into Atlanta, we drove to Statesboro, Georgia. And Chris toured the factory, and he said, I asked him, can I plug my stuff up to your amp to see if it's what I think it is, what I want? He said, yeah, sure. And so when I did, I knew right away I had found the amp, and especially when they did my tweaks on the speakers. And so that came out of NAMM. Well, the second time we went to Summer NAMM, Gypsy and me and Bob Henry, our drummer on the Barbarian Army record, performed at the Devil Cat booth. And we did 1 song a day up there. And I played one of his guitars, because at the time I hadn't really thought about a guitar. But I knew when I played them, I'm like, these are really good. I knew they were USA made. And most importantly, Chris isn't trying to break the bank on people. And he walked up to me after the last day there, and he said, we need to do a signature guitar with you inspired by what your wife does, because that's a really cool story. And it just so happens Chris Mitchell has the same last name of the Gypsy Queen that's buried in Meridian. So that's where the signature guitar came from. And they did exactly what I wanted. And out of that, I started thinking about that guitar. And on an electric guitar, the big thing is the pickups you put in it. And I had been using Doug Aldrich signature pickups for many years. And I very nearly put them in the guitar because they're that good. They're a great pickup. But I could hear a few things that, to my taste, I wanted. And then I said, this guitar is inspired by Gypsy. It's my guitar. So I'm going to see if I can get somebody to do me some pickups for it. Well, I had got some pickups from a company called BG Pickups. That's Brian Guncher. When I first started working with Brian, he was in Northern California. He did me a set of humbucker size P90s that were just fabulous. And again, Brian is not trying to just kill people money wise. So I contacted Brian. I said, would you be interested in doing this? And he said, yeah. He said, we can do that. And guys that do pickups come from a different place. How you can describe tones and things to them and then use magnets and wire to get that.
Yeah.
That's,
I get pedals because you can design a circuit based off something similar to all right, this is what it's going to make the wave do this or that. But I'm with you on the pickup thing. That's I don't know. Right. I can't wrap my mind around it.
So, the Gypsy signature guitar with CMG, that's my signature guitar, is a CMG Gypsy. Well, he did me some BG Gypsy pickups, and we put them in that guitar, and they're just perfect. They're fabulous. And I got a second guitar coming from them as well that will have those pickups. But all of that grew out of those first trips to NAMM. And most most all of the endorsements that I picked up have come from those initial trips to NAMM. And I've got one coming that I can't really talk about yet. And but it, and then probably the next couple of weeks, everybody's going to know about it. And it's going to put me and Gypsy back at Anaheim at Winter NAMM, probably performing.
Nice.
And but there again, we worked really well together on that. And so I always have a good time at NAMM. If you're a musician, especially, you should go to one of the ones in Anaheim at least once in your life.
I want to go so bad, dude.
Now,
I wanted to go for
you're
years.
Talking about having gear acquisition syndrome. After you go to NAMM, buddy,
you're gonna have a complex.
Yeah. Oh my God, yeah.
You can't see it all in 3 days. It's
J-Rob, we gotta go. And I've been telling you for hours, we gotta go.
No, I'm gonna have to like make sure I got nothing planned before or after that, so I can just soak it all in.
You're also, you're gonna meet all those great players. Like the last time I went to NAMM, obviously me and Doug hang out a lot there, but the last time I went, I saw Stanley Jordan. I talked to Paul Gilbert. Just any number of players like that. Todd Kearns from Slash's band, Richie Kotzen, just so many of them. And in that environment, they're not quite, for lack of a better word, not quite so guarded as if maybe you just ran into them somewhere.
Right.
And also at NAMM, like me, like Paul Gilbert changed the way I play. The first time I heard Racer X on the college station up there in Tennessee, I was like, what? Because his right hand is just perfect. And so if I had saw Paul Gilbert in a restaurant, I wouldn't have approached him. I just wouldn't bother somebody like that. But at NAMM, that's kind of what they're there for. And I walked up to him and I said, Paul, I said, I just want to thank you for being such a good teacher through the years. And I said, you changed the way I play. He reached in his pocket and he said, you know what? He said, that's just one of the nicer things anybody's ever said. So here, have my lucky guitar pick. And
wow, that's awesome.
There's that kind of experience that you, as a musician, that you're going to have out there. And Summer NAMM, COVID kind of messed up Summer NAMM this year. And we've always had a good time at Summer NAMM, but it probably won't be back right till at least 2022. But like I said, if you're a musician especially, and you can ever go to Anaheim to that, it's worth it. It's hectic, but it's worth it.
Oh, I bet. I mean, when you started approaching those people, and not to get into your business at all, go as far as you want to go with this, but like on the first few trips and you started talking to some of the manufacturers and people like that, were that like hey, I'm Ted, and then they hear you play or hear something you'd already been doing or something to get some of those relationships going?
Well, to be honest, those first trips, like I said, when Gypsy's with me,
kind of opens the doors.
Starts much easier.
Sure.
And one thing I learned, and this is a guitar player that I have to touch on, Doug Aldrich. When I met Doug in 2011 is when I actually met him. I had talked to him on his message board on his old website for a few years before then. But when I met Doug, I knew I knew all of his 80s bands, but I knew he had been with Dio and Whitesnake, right, which were two of the probably the more sought after gigs that were still out there in the 2000s. And I knew he was a great player, had DVDs of him with those bands, and I knew he was a nice guy because he took the time to talk to people. And he actually sent me a message before the Biloxi concert of that tour, because he knew my son was a huge Whitesnake fan. And he said, look, he said, I don't know what my schedule is. He said, but I want to meet you and Matt, my son. Well, right there, I knew all I needed to know. But when I met him, I realized real quick that there was more to getting good gigs than just being a great player. And when I met Doug, how gracious he was with his fans, how much of a people person he was, how he represented companies. He was in shape. He had that rock and roll look, the total thing. And I came away from that, and I said, and plus he did multiple bands at the same time. So I said, you know what, if that'll work at that level, I can make that work on a regional, local level. And that's what I did. I came home, lost about 30 pounds, really paid attention to that, and made sure that, which this was never a problem for me, but I made sure that if I was in a band, that they got better, be it by work ethic, playing, whatever it was. I just wanted them to be better. And for word to get out that, you know, hey, if you get Ted in your band, things are going to go really good. And it worked. And so Doug, as far as my approach to dealing with companies, how I interact in a band, the way I present it all, I had seen those things before, but it's like when I met him, it all made sense. And ever since then, that's the way I've approached all of it. And the thing with a company, that what a company wants, and this is what a lot of guitar players, a lot of musicians don't realize. You can be the most fabulous player there is, but a company wants somebody to help them sell their product.
Right.
And sometimes personality can sell that product more than playing. And if they know, you'd say like a Carl Martin or a Devil Cat or String Joy or Bullet Cable, if they know, okay, this guy's, he's going to really put us out there in the right way and come off in a good light, they're more likely to work with you. And the other thing is, I don't immediately approach companies with any expectation of, oh, you're going to do this for me, or I want this. I know somebody that kind of did that and it didn't go so well. And I don't do that. I'm like with Carl Martin, I wanted to be one of their artists, but I had already bought everything I needed, you know?
Yeah.
And like Devil Cat, CMG Devil Cat's been really, that has done so much for me. And Chris has believed in me and Gypsy to the point of doing just some really cool stuff for me. And you know, there's some things coming from them that I'm not going to mention yet, but it's just some really cool stuff. And like some of those endorsements are really unique. Like Stone Senate played a show about a month ago in McKinney, Texas. And it's a festival show with a bunch of vendors. And I was walking through the vendors. I went to get something to drink, and I happened to look over and see a booth with a bunch of guitar picks. And it turned out it was a family-owned company from San Antonio called Natural Seed Guitar Picks. Their picks are made out of different types of stone, which I had seen before, but I had never seen one in a Jazz XL shape. So I started talking to them, and it just so happened that ordinarily for this promoter, we would play a Saturday, and that would be the only show we played, but we filled in for another band the next day. So the guy that runs that company, Kevin LaPlatte, gave me one of their picks, said, use it, tell me what you think. And so I asked him, I said, well, if I like this, would you be willing to work on something with me? And he said, well, go play the pick and we'll talk about it. So I did. I went right after the show. I went back up there and talked to him. I said, well, it's a really good pick. I said, but I'd like it better if you would do this, this, and this. And he did, and just nailed them. They are just some of the most well put together guitar picks I've ever used. And he was like, you know, we want a player like you putting this out there. And he said, not only that, he said, we were waiting for somebody to develop a really unique product with. And the like with Stone guitar picks, the thing that I'd notice about them is if there's any imperfection in that edge, it catches on the string.
Right.
The first pick he gave me had 2 small hairline little indentions. I ran my thumb over and found them. And had I not, I'd have put them under a microscope and looked. But I told him that. I said, I want a more rounded bevel on the edge of the pick because that's the way I play. I said, and they have got to be flawless. And they just nailed them. And he said, we want to, you know, develop a unique product, and we feel like working with you is going to help us do that. So that was a little bit different than some of the deals I've done. And, but to me, that's one of the more interesting ones just because of what it is.
Sure. So how is the wear on a Stone pick? I don't guess I've ever even had one in my hand.
The ones that I have now, there is no wear. It does wear the string a little different, but not enough to bother me.
Probably not as, probably around the time you're going to change strings anyway, I assume.
Yeah, for me, it's all been the same.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that some players might with a Stone pick is because it's smooth, the grip can be a little different, but we're working on that as well. And, but, you know, that's one of the more unique endorsement experiences I've had.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, man.
And just really happy with all the stuff that I endorse are things that I'm using. To me, that's important that you believe in it enough that you're going to put it out there, you know, and not just be, well, hey, I'm on their artist page, but I don't use anything they got.
Right. Or not the, you know, like you said, something, not just using it because you worked out some kind of deal with them and not be truly happy with how it sounds, feels, or plays, you know.
It's like Carl Martin. All 3 of us use Carl Martin stuff, and it's all over the new record.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's the kind of thing with an endorsement that I can feel really good about.
I don't think I've ever tried any Carl Martin stuff either. The new stuff I got in, been watching this guy, Josh Scott, on YouTube with JHS. So I got a few of his pedals and gonna give them a whirl.
Yeah. I had been a Carl Martin user for many, many years, and they're more of an analog, a little bit of a throwback in some ways, which is what I like about them. And also, most of the Carl Martin stuff runs at 12 volts, which gives it a little more headroom.
Okay.
And that's important. That's something that I can hear it. I don't know if everybody can hear those type of things, but it's kind of like using a 20 watt amp or using a 100 watt. The 100 watter's got way more headroom to it.
Oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
How many people you know have a signature guitar, J-Rob?
Personally, absolutely nobody except Ted.
Well,
it's freaking awesome, man. I'm sitting here just like, it just keeps swimming around in my head.
I've been wondering for the last 25 years, how the hell I could get one, but I haven't figured that out yet.
Chris, Chris will build anybody whatever they want, but he approached me about that guitar, so I thank him and Gypsy for that.
Hey, and that's a thing, even without being on somebody's artist roster or somebody being like giving me a guitar or whatever, I'd just like to have one, find a company to work with and make something that's just all me. You know what I mean?
Right. And when he offered that, I really wasn't looking when he offered that, but I was like, there's no way I can turn that down.
No, dude.
And
especially if you've got the opportunity to have him to make it exactly how you want it to feel,
And it's just a fabulous guitar.
That's awesome.
I'd never get tired of playing it.
I might actually look into checking in with them to see about getting something made, man. I'd like to check out something that they
definitely do. They're a small company. They're all USA, and I think if you check them out price wise, you'd really be surprised.
Well, see, that's the thing. It'd be astronomical to go to like Gibson or Fender Custom Shop or something like that and get something made the way you want it. I mean,
yep.
When you could just
That's
pull
true.
a player series Strat off the wall and it'd be perfectly fine. But
yeah, if one of those companies had built the signature guitar I've got, I couldn't touch it. Sure. Money wise. There's no way. But Chris doesn't do that to people.
That's awesome.
And he's a real good example of that you can build that quality in this country and it not cost people more than it needs to.
Right.
And I really appreciate that about him. And that's one of the reasons that when I started talking to him about his company and how he does things, he was really open about all of it. And I would tell anybody, amp, guitar, definitely go talk to him. And he's just a good guy. And he's a guitar player, so he understands a lot of what we want,
Now, this guy with the guitar, that they actually the same company that's doing the Devil Cat amps too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I think Devil Cat came first because he wanted an amp that did everything he needed it to. And he happened on the right guy in Lane White to make that happen.
Right.
And then the guitar came a little bit later, and but he the amp is very different in a lot of ways. It's got a built-in tube screamer on it, right at the front of the signal chain, and you can I can switch that tube screamer in with my pedal board so I can have it where I want it or where I don't want it. The clean channel on it, I would say it's got some of the old Fender qualities to it, but a little bit different there. The overdrive channel has its own thing. It sort of reminds me of somewhere between a hot rodded Marshall and a Soldano. Little. I mean, that's just a generalization, but the amp, it's well put together. It's a lifetime warranty. Everything down to the knobs on it are made in the United States. And money wise, you just can't beat it. You can't. And it has been on the road with me now for going on 3 years, and I've never had any issue, not a single thing. And other than every sound man that I play for going, what is that?
Really?
Nice.
Hey, that's awesome, dude. That's awesome.
Yeah. And it blends well with James's rig too. And it's got to do that.
Right. He's just not going to give up on birthday anytime soon, is he?
Probably not. We put a lot of work into that rig. And it still sounds amazing.
It does that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
So tell us about hanging backstage with Whitesnake.
When we saw Whitesnake in Biloxi, I had already got tickets to the South Haven show 4 days later, and Doug he told me, he said, "Hey, you want me to get y'all backstage passes?" I'm like, "Sure,"
Did you need to ask?
Yeah. Now, Whitesnake is my impression is they are a very professional band, especially at this point. David Coverdale runs a very tight ship. So it probably wasn't what most people would think of as a typical 80s backstage. Of course, this was 20 years past the fact, too. But actually, the only person that we didn't meet was David Coverdale. And Doug, we saw Doug at sound check, and he said, I don't know if David will come out. And I just told him, I said, well, Doug, I said, I'm really here to see you, and Doug has always just been cool to me. And he, the last time I went to NAMM at Anaheim, I made that trip by myself. And when I walked around the corner, he stopped his whole thing, walked off stage and hugged my neck. And the first thing he said was, "Where's Gypsy?" But any time that I've hung out with Doug in any situation, it's always been cool. And but at that point, it was Reb Beach was the other guitar player. Marco Mendoza was playing bass, and I think on that tour, Brian Tishy was playing drums.
Oh, he's badass.
Which is funny. This is a funny story because after Doug got out of Whitesnake, he's now in a band called Dead Daisies.
Mm-hmm.
And so Marco Mendoza was also in Dead Daisies. And the first night that Gypsy met Doug, we went and saw them in Nashville. And, we kind of went after the show to meet them. They had a lot of people going through, meeting them. And so the first person she walks up to is Marco Mendoza. And, my wife is just gorgeous. She's very outgoing. But Marco stood up and just planted one right on her cheek. And, he was all, however, well, I was the next person in line. And he had asked her name. She said, "I'm Gypsy," and so I walk up to him and he's like, "Hey man, how's it going?" I said, "I'm Mr. Gypsy." And his eyes got as big as plates. He thought I was fixing to kill him. And I'm like, "Man, don't worry." I'm like, she gets that all the time. And he said, "Man, you got a great attitude about it." But anyway, fun stuff.
Yeah, man. What
That's
about
awesome.
that Billy Gibbons gig, man? Did y'all get to meet and hang with him any?
We hung out with Matt Sorum, who was his drummer for a while, and then I cut out a little bit early getting on back, but James got to meet Billy just brief. Nice. Billy took a lot of precautions for COVID and whatnot.
Yeah.
But James said he was really cool. And Matt Sorum was just a blast. That's a guy that's played for the Cult and Guns N' Roses.
Oh yeah, man. He's been around.
Really cool.
Velvet Revolver.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know James was big time excited about the Billy Gibbons gig. I'm glad he got to meet him.
Yeah. He Tres Hombres changed James's life.
Shoot, man. Yeah, right here too. That's
great record.
That's untouchable.
Yep.
That is awesome, man. That is awesome. Well, I mean, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to share?
I think we've touched on a lot of everything. Really. I've enjoyed it, man. I really have. I could talk about guitars and music, and And, for me at this point in my music career, and I'm sure both of y'all can say this too, no matter what level it is, the big thing to me these days is people.
Yep.
I like being around people that are cool to each other, that are kind to each other, because there's too much ugliness in this world. And I'm very appreciative of both Stone Senate, the people I do QCG Barbarian Army with, of all of those people, and of the companies that have put enough faith in me to say, hey, we're gonna put Ted out here promoting our product. And people is the real important thing to me. And I'm blessed to have that. And people like y'all, Charles, from day one, you just been beyond nice to me. And one of the hardest working people I know. And I appreciate all that. I really do.
I appreciate it too. Big time, man. You've always been a good guy in the business, and you always want to make sure that you surround yourself, whether you're doing business with them or not, that with people that is the good guys in the business that you're in, because you're going to cross paths at different times. And
right.
Just like this, it's like when me and him talked about doing this, I was like, I know some people I can, get on here that's got some really good stories and really good information to spread to people maybe that want to do this, and fans, on this level and all that type of stuff. And I said, I think this could be really cool. So I'm glad that, I was able to make that happen and cross back paths in that way, with good people.
Yeah, that's great. I guess really the only other thing I probably need to say is Stone Senate's got a new single out called Down.
And it's great, by the way.
I appreciate that so much. It's a fun song. And
man.
So if you have Django Radio or some of those places, QCG has a single out called 90s Cali Song. It's an instrumental song. And it's done really well for what I'm doing with it. But both of those, check both of them out. Down you can find everywhere. And Down is a very appropriate song for the time we're coming out of, and hopefully a better time we're going into.
Absolutely.
And it's a fun song.
What is, and I always say this, and I'm sure you've seen it on the other podcasts, but what is something you would tell somebody new, up and coming, to think about, to do, and what's something you'd tell them not to do?
I would definitely, this is going to sound a little cliched. If you're talking about going into the music industry, you treat people the way you want to be treated, but if you go into the entertainment industry, keep your eyes open. You need to have some thick skin, because you're going to hear some things you don't want to hear. And the other thing that I heard Kenny Rogers say this many years ago is, if you really love what you're doing, don't take your eyes off of it, because I'm living proof that it may take you 3 or 4 decades to get there, and I'm not there yet, but don't give up if you really believe in it. Never take your eyes off of it, and be professional in what you're doing. Things that I would tell people to not do, usually in this industry, in my experience, is if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So be aware of that. And, like I've always told my kids, be alert. And, but that would be the main thing is, if it seems too good to be true, there's a lot of people, and I'm sure you know this, there's a lot of people that the main thing they want out of your career is your bank account.
Yeah.
And these days there are more than ever people in companies like that. So, pay attention to what you're dealing with and how you're dealing with it. And for me, and I say this from experience, if you're fortunate enough to find a James or a Doug Aldrich or somebody like that obviously does things right, and they are willing to give you the time. I tell you what, this is the most important thing I can say about it. Be a listener. It will serve you well, both in the sense of listen to what you're doing in a band, but listen to everything that's coming in. Pay attention to it. And in life and in music, that is as important as I can tell somebody.
Amen.
Absolutely. That's good stuff. I love it. Man, thank you so much, dude, for everything. I mean, this has been good. A lot of the podcasts we've had to really, keep them going, and but you've kind of taken the bull by the horns and made our job easy tonight.
Well, I appreciate y'all having me on here and letting me talk about stuff that's near and dear to my heart. And I could go on and on and on and on about especially guitars and tones and anything to do with
dude, it. Yeah, we got to have some more. Hope to have some more time to talk, and hopefully in person, about all the above. We could spend the whole night for sure, many nights. But man, like I said, the first time not the first time, but me and my wife saw that video with you doing the oud thing on there, and we both were like, man, this cat right here has got a great vibe. So it is most definitely a pleasure to get to meet you for real and talk and hear some of your stories, man. It's been great.
Oh, I appreciate it. Like I said, I just so glad y'all had me on here. I've enjoyed it.
Dude, it's been a blast. I really appreciate it, man. We love you, dude. You're a great guy and a great guy in this business, and just a, awesome person overall.
Yeah, much love to you, brother. Appreciate you.
Thank y'all so much.
All right. Y'all have a good night.
Peace out.
You too.
See ya.
All right.